Joshua, Denny, thank you for joining us for the Sunday Tribune.
No problem.
Today we're going to talk about Gurdjieff and Beelzebub's tales. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about what your take is of Beelzebub's tales to his grandson.
Right. Well, obviously that's a very, a big question to try to give a short answer to. I'd say on the whole, like it would be classed as sort of like a mythological text, like the style of writing. So it weaves together like, ideas of fact, fiction, allegory, symbology, all that kind of thing. So I'd be careful in approaching it as just a literal text and just taking it, as it's presented. So why, like when I first came into contact with the book, when I first come across it, I'd already read Life is Real, Only Then When I Am. And that's kind of very autobiographical, like, the style of the content as well as the style. It's very just sort of written in fairly plain and simple language.
So Jeff's third book, isn't it?
Yeah, his third book, his last book. And that's written in pretty simple language, fairly easy to understand. So I read that, and I read this, like my parents were interested in the ideas, so that's how I came across them. So the books were around from a young age. So I first read Life is Real, or tried to read it when I was about 11. So that's the sort of age that I came across it.
Wow.
So I struggled with that, made my way through that. And then I came across, not long after that, Beelzebub's Tales. And it was a big shock to me from going from Life is Real, to that kind of style of writing, to seeing Gurdjieff writing that to writing Beelzebub's Tales, because it's like, going from a kind of a fact book, if you like, to almost like a fiction book. It seemed a very strange kind of book. So I was, that was a big shock to me. And I thought, well, why would he choose to put his message, his ideas or his teaching in that kind of form, like, a strange sort of science fiction narrative or structure, And one idea of that, maybe as a reason why, kind of connects with some of the ideas in Beelzebub's Tales itself. Like, there is the idea that, say, truth or maybe higher information or just even new learning can only come to us kind of in the form of a lie, let's say. Then, like Gurdjieff mentioned this kind of a bit more openly in Search of the Miraculous to Ouspensky. Like, he kind of says, if truth sort of undiluted, to some extent, is indigestible to us. So it's like, in order for us to really receive anything or take it on, there has to be some kind of alteration in the presentation. Something has to be done with it. It can't just be given straight, if you like. There has to be some kind of tampering with it, if you like. So, and part of that idea then is if information needs to be molded or shaped in a certain fashion in order to be taken in, one of the means of doing that is through, like, what we could call fiction or story, narrative. So that's one of the possible reasons why, like, Gurdjieff chose that kind of form for the book, rather than just like him saying, this is how it is, this is the way I see things. Rather than doing that, he's put the information into a kind of a story or narrative, like, say, like a myth thing, structure. So yeah, part of his reason for doing that is that maybe through that kind of form, rather than engaging the material directly, as if it was just Gurdjieff saying this is how it is, engaging through a story form, it has the potential possibility for us to penetrate deeper into us, or for us to get a deeper understanding rather than just a superficial.
Because he does tell us to read it 3 times, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, and he specifies that he advises to read them sort of like 3 different ways each time. Like, one, just to read it as if you're reading your normal paper, or however you're sort of habitually accustomed to read. And then, like, the second time, possibly to read it as if you were reading it aloud to another person. And then, like he says, the third time, when you try and read it and actually try to make sense of it or get the gist of it. So you could see that even in that sort of instruction itself, to read them not just three times, but 3 different ways. Again, it's playing with the idea of trying to get you possibly to look into, like, how you are reading, how you do approach things. Because, like, obviously I kind of take it for granted that I can read, and I just read in whatever ways you know, habitual or accustomed to me. So it's a strange thing for someone to sort of point your attention just onto a basic act, like something as simple as reading, and asking you to inquire into that, you know, again, and trying to get to see it, you know, clearer or maybe different insight into what's going on there. So, like, again, part of maybe why the reason he chose a story form and why he chose, say, let's say, like a character like Beelzebub. So, you know, he's using an extreme character, you know, people have got strong associations towards, you know, the name Beelzebub. And then you've got all this science fiction stuff along with that. So it's like, it's putting the whatever, you know, the information that he's telling you in a very strange foreign context. So it creates this sort of separation between you and the material and a certain sense of foreignness, you know, straight away to the material, you know. I mean, even if a person maybe has some sort of religious knowledge, you know, to do with, like, you know, knows a bit about Beelzebub and stuff like that. Even if they had that knowledge at the time that it was written, it'd be unlikely that many people who have had any knowledge of sort of like science fiction and spaceships and things like that. So even then, there would, even at the time it was written, though more people might have had a religious knowledge and had more sort of associations towards the word Beelzebub, they still wouldn't have like much material on, say, science fiction and things like that. So it all works towards putting the information in a sort of foreign context to create to approach it in a new way, you know, because that's like how we approach things in general. If there's no sense of it being different, you know, whatever I'm looking at, then I just see it habitually. It doesn't kind of grab my attention. But if there's something in the room that I don't know what it is or seems foreign, my attention's pinged onto it. So again, that's possible. One of the possible reasons why he chose, like, say, a character like Beelzebub in that sort of form is to help people engage with the material in a new way, you know, in a sort of a more self-conscious way.
I've not met many people that read Beelzebubs from a young age, and you said that your family were reading it, and so you started reading it at quite a young age. So you must have seen it quite differently from us people like myself. I didn't read it until I was 28, and at first I just saw it as a sci-fi book. It took me a
Yeah,
few goes before I realised what it had in it, the secret meanings, and well, not the secret meanings, but the extra meanings and the depth of what he was really trying to tell us.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, although I read it early, and like I say, my parents were, you know, they'd been interested in not just the Gurdjieff ideas, but like spirituality in general. You know, they'd done some meditation, different things. So though they were interested in those ideas, they weren't very heavily into it at the time that I was born. So they weren't sort of, say, like involved in groups at the time or going to movements or things like that. So I wasn't observing that kind of side of it. So there wasn't, and they didn't talk much about Gurdjieff. Like when I read the books, or first read Life is Real When I Am, it was mainly just because I saw it lying around and just decided to have a look at it. It wasn't like because my parents were saying, you know, Gurdjieff's is this great master, and you know, you need to live your life according to this teaching. So I picked it up with, I would say, fairly innocent eyes. You know, just 11-year-old, an average sort of really 11-year-old's eyes. So I didn't have any sense of like it being esoteric, or you know, I didn't really have many preconceptions about what was going to be in it. So I didn't have any idea who Gurdjieff was, or you know, about it. So I was just kind of really engaging with it as, you know, just as an innocent person would. And I suppose like the first thing that struck me about that was just, yeah, it was well, not only the title. I mean, that was you know, it's probably the strangest title for a book uh, I've ever seen, or at least certainly never ever seen it to that point. You know, life is real only then when I am. That in itself was just like, as an 11-year-old, just like, well, what does that mean? Life is real only then when I am. So, and then, you know, engaging with the material in it, like he has that great, like he has his preface in that, you know, like it's a big soliloquy, you know, it kind of goes into the question of I am, and things like that. So that was the first time I'd ever heard anybody talking about their own sort of inner world, you know, their own experiences in the kind of such like the stark way, or like he seemed to be like, again, this is just the impression I got from being an 11-year-old. He just seemed to be a really sort of, I'd say, clever guy, like someone who could really saw clearly into his own world and was very articulate at expressing it. So that was kind of really the only picture that was formed in me towards Gurdjieff, was just this guy who was very sort of say clever and insightful into his own inner world, and was just expressing, you know, what he'd found there.
And you yourself have gone on to write a couple of books, reflections on, you want to tell me the titles? Reflections on Beelzebub's Tales, but you don't call it Beelzebub's Tales, do you?
It's just a play on words. It's called Reflections on the Bezel Hub's Tales, and like why I kind of, you know, just decided to sort of put a play on words was just because I'd happened to this was a lot like a long time ago. I happened to read The Wisdom of the Prophets, a book by Sufi Ibn Arabi, and another translation kind of the title is that can be connected with the idea of like a seal, or you know, like a bezel. You know, a bezel is like, you know, a round, like a jewel.
Yes, the jewel I know it as.
Yeah, so another, like you could say, another translation of the book is called, you could call it like the bezels of wisdom, or the seal of wisdom, or the bezel of wisdom. So just in reading that book, which is great, I can recommend to anybody. I, you know, found it amazing. Um, I think, like I say, the normal translation is just The Wisdom of the Prophets by Ibn Arabi. But in reading that book, I found it great. And having already read some Gurdjieff, and then after going back to Gurdjieff after having read it, I saw lots of sort of connections between the same ideas. So it it just came to me like an idea of blending the two together. And I was happy to see, I think it might be last year or the year before, I just became aware of it through the internet, that I think somebody gave a presentation at the conference, you know, one of the A&E conferences, and they had like they titled their piece something like The Bezels of Beelzebub, and they were exploring the same thing. They were exploring these connections between, you know, Gurdjieff's ideas in Beelzebub and those in Ibn Arabi. So that was kind of why I sort of put it together.
And your book's available on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think you can get it through a couple of other online sellers, but I just like, it wasn't a book that I sort of like purposely set out to write. It's just really a collection of bits of my own writings and things that and correspondences that I've had with other people over the course of, like, you know, many years. You know, since I become, you know, aware of this material. So my partner was actually in the process of writing her own book, and decided to self-publish it. And one of her family members had done that in the past, so they'd agreed to help her out with it. You know, like how to format it, because I'm not really, neither of us is very techie. You know, we don't know much about computers and stuff like that. So he agreed to help her format her book and, you know, publish it through this self-publishing company. So she was working on that and getting towards the end of that, and then she just suggested to me, why don't you, you know, put something out there? Put, you know, I know you've got all this bits of your writing that you've had for years. Why don't you just put some of it together and stick it out there? You know, why not? So I said, okay, you know, why not? But the family member who was helping us out only had a limited time, and he was going away on holiday. So I was rushed, you know, to get it, try and find all these, you know, bits of writing, some of which were just, you know, scraps of paper, you know, lost. So, you know, gather it all together really quickly and then try and edit it all, because most of it's just written in my kind of shorthand, you know, for myself. So trying to edit it in a form that makes it a bit more accessible to other people. So I'm still, you know, happy with it, but there are like still some formatting issues and things like that. But yeah, so it's just a collection of my sort of take on not just Gurdjieff, but also some of the other, you know, known pupils and other people, you know, the ideas of those around him.
Because you also have a Facebook page, uh, also called the same name, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just called Bezel Hub's Tales, so people can find that, I suppose, if they want to, by searching on Facebook groups. And again, I just put up my musings, and people can comment and tell me what they think of it in no uncertain terms.
Well, that's one of the great things about Gurdjieff, isn't it? That we can all discuss quite openly, and if we've learned the way Gurdjieff, what he instructs us properly, we should all be able to do it in a nice manner.
Ideally, yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would be nice if it panned out that way, if we could all meet together and get on, I suppose. Yeah. But
What
yeah, it's great that, like you say, it's great that I suppose that we do have this technology now, you know, things like Facebook so we can meet, you know, even if it's just through not even a face, but just words, you know, online. It's still something, you know, means for people to share, come together.
Gurdjieff would have loved the internet.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, he was all into, you know, well, to at least a large extent, to his new technology and new ideas, wasn't he? You know, so yeah, I could certainly see him online, like live streaming something, sitting there with his fez, you know,
Yes.
yeah,
Away. Yes, he would
yeah,
be, wouldn't he? It'd be fantastic.
yeah,
Well, I also like to thank you for speaking with me today, and we'll do some more of these soon. Thank you
yeah,
very much.
that's great. Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.